Ari Ishmael, an attorney at law, an expert in combat fighting, karate in particular. Mr. Terry Young, a former police officer, senior police officer. Mr. Simon de Nobrega, a businessman. Our beloved and well-known Miss Cleopatra Borrell, our shot put champion. And Dr. Rochelle Mohammed. The board asks for 5 positions to be filled to make it in its capacity, and we have done so this morning in the cabinet. Any questions? No? All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. And I'll ask the Minister of Labour and Small Enterprise Development to make an announcement.
Thank you very much, colleague Minister of Communication, Maxi Coffey, and my colleague Minister of Sports, Youth. Good afternoon, members of the media. I'm pleased to indicate that the Cabinet approved the coordinated implementation of activities to empower unemployed persons in Trinidad and Tobago. The Ministry of Labour and Small Enterprise Division, Small Enterprise Development, has recognized that the issue of unemployment in Trinidad and Tobago is multi-dimensional in nature, and the implications have very obvious financial consequences, including economic, social, physical, mental, and psychological effects. As a consequence, the Cabinet agreed on a 10-point plan focusing on the unemployed in the society, on unemployment. And the objective of this plan is to provide immediate, short, and medium-term assistance to unemployed persons and, where necessary, their families, to mitigate against the negative financial, social, physical, psychological effects of unemployment. The Ministry of Labour recognizes the implementation and the realization of objectives require not only support, government support, but it also requires collaboration with various stakeholders. In that context, the Ministry of Labour and Small Enterprise Development, the National Employment Services Division, will take the lead role in this regard. Collaboration has been held with the Ministry of Trade and Industry, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Community Development, Culture and the Arts, the National Insurance Board, Trinidad and Tobago Mortgage Finance Company Limited, the Bankers Association of Trinidad and Tobago, the Credit Union League of Trinidad and Tobago, the United Nations Development Program, the International Labour Organization, Decent Work Team and Office for the Caribbean, the Energy Chamber of Trinidad and Tobago, the National Energy Skills Center, the American Chamber of Commerce Trinidad and Tobago, as well as Elder Associates. We have had those collaboration meetings. Some elements of the 10-point plan revolves around the establishment of a national register where we hope to capture persons who are unemployed and those who have been retrenched. The plan also looks at the development of a marketing campaign to solicit new job opportunities for unemployed and to facilitate jobs and job matching skills. The plan would also look at operationalization of training, retraining, upskilling, multi-skilling of the unemployed. What we suspect is that there is a large volume of unemployed persons out there who may have experience but are uncertified. And in that context, we are partnering with the Energy Chamber and the National Training Agency, as well as the National Employment Skills Center. The plan also looks at the need for the provision of psychological and financial counseling to unemployed persons and their families. And in that context, the Ministry of Health will provide wellness and counseling services to them and their families. And a hotline would be developed which would connect the unemployed persons to a web-trix of services. We also looked at the formation of small businesses and cooperatives by the unemployed through NETCO, the National Enterprise Development Company Limited, and the cooperative division of the Ministry of Labor. Also, the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, they are also collaborating with us with regards to the provision of seed capital for startup small businesses. Discussions were also held with the financial sector in adopting a humane approach regarding loans and mortgages of such unemployed persons. The issue of also exploring job opportunities external to Trinidad and Tobago is also on the table, particularly in CARICOM countries. And a job expo, which is planned for next week, Tuesday the 5th of April. And that is planned at the National Skills Energy Center, National Energy Skills Center, on Rivulet Road, Point Lisa, Scoover. We are bringing together all the stakeholders in this regard. And there would be booths, financial counseling, psychological counseling, individual counseling. We'll also be looking at placement, where those unemployed who would be attending would get the opportunity to meet and interface directly with employers. They'll be obtaining information on training, retraining, upskilling, skills assessment, certification programs. It will be a full day of empowering activities from 9 to 5 p.m. Where the relevant information and advice and counseling, information sessions, empowering sessions through the delivery of persons in the form of Anthony Watkins, who those people gathered there would be given these motivational empowerment talks. At the end of the exercise, the ministry, in collaboration with all the stakeholders, we will ensure that satellite hubs are established to continue the delivery of all the services that I have mentioned. The Ministry of Trade and Industry, which is committed to partnering with the Ministry of Labor and Small Enterprise Development. They are coordinating the private sector organizations such as the Trinidad and Tobago Manufacturers Association, the Employers Consultative Association, the American Chamber, and all those other chambers, and large private sector firms. They will also be participating in the job expo for next week, Tuesday. At the end of that exercise, the Ministry of Labor and Small Enterprise Development, through its National Employment Services Division, hopes to provide that enabling environment. The government is not in a position to provide jobs for all the unemployed in this country. As a consequence, therefore, it is necessary for us to partner with the private sector as well as collaborate with the other providers of services falling under the umbrella of the various ministries that I have cited earlier. The intention here is to empower people, to ensure that people continue to have hope in themselves and their abilities to interface directly with the employers, and those employers who would be participating in the Job Expo next week, Tuesday, are coming with jobs so that the relationships can be established. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Minister. So now we are willing to take your questions on the Job Empowerment Expo or the announcement of the Boxing Board in Ministry of Sports, and any other questions that you may have for us.
Question for the Minister of Labour. You mentioned that discussions were also held with the financial sector with regard to a humane approach in relation to loans. What was the
mortgages.
And mortgages. What was the feedback from that sector? Have they made any concrete assurances or undertakings?
Yes, actually, the feedback was very, very encouraging. In at least one case, that particular, the Trinidad and Tobago Mortgage Finance Company Limited, when we met with them, they were able to tell us how many persons they had identified from their database who were unemployed and had loans or mortgages with them, and they have developed a particular approach similar to the Bankers Association, the Credit Union League, so that the feedback is a positive one. There are a number of different ways, creative ways that they can engage in terms of lessening the burden. It is not that persons would not be called upon to honor their financial obligation, but in many instances, they can look at expanding the period of time and reducing the monthly repayments. So the feedback has been very, very positive.
How many persons did the TTMF identify from their database?
Well, I think they identified a little over 50 persons from their database, and they were very proactive.
And were any other private sector financing institutions involved in these discussions, or just TTMF?
Well, as I said, TTMF, the Credit Union League, under which comes the majority of the credit unions in this country, and the Bankers Association, under which all the banks in the country fall under, there was positive feedback in that regard. And they would also be participating in the Job Expo next week, Tuesday. The banks, the credit unions, and the other financial institutions, as well as those employers and the various ministries, which I have cited earlier.
Creative ways in which repayments can be restructured?
Well, what was indicated to us, they will view the situation on a case-by-case basis. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. It depends on what position the particular person is in, that they will respond and respond positively.
Minister Drew Brown, TV6 News, any sort of estimate in terms of the number of job losses that have occurred, let's say, within the last 6 months, and any concerns from the government in terms of what could be projected in terms of job losses in the next few months going forward?
Well, to take the last aspect of your question, firstly, we are not in a position to project job losses, and that is why we, as the government, we have adopted the moral suasion approach in terms of encouraging employers not to retrench or to terminate the services of employees without examining the other options. With regards to the earlier part of your question, it is in the vicinity, we suspect, because remember, we do not have all the data. That data should be obtained from the Central Statistical Office, and you know, as members of the media, you know that situation better than myself. Hence the reason why a new mechanism is being put in place to capture the kind of data so that our policies can be data-driven. But I can give you what my suspicions are in terms of the unemployed from September to now. I suspect they may be in the vicinity of 5,000 or perhaps a little beyond that.
And then with the job fair,
it's not a fear, it's an expo.
Yes,
Fear brings in a kind of joviality that we would not find in the lives of those persons who are unemployed.
And so corrected, the job expo that is meant to at least help some of those who are unemployed get employment.
To provide an enabling environment for them.
Would there be a challenge in the sense that, for example, those who lost jobs in the construction sector who may have been receiving salaries that might be more than what may be available in other sectors in terms of absorbing those persons in the construction or other areas. You have the ArcelorMittal situation, the steel workers, you have OAS. Is that a challenge in terms of getting those persons employed in a way that they would be satisfied with?
That's a very important point that you have raised, because in these times of economic depression where people lose their jobs, sometimes it becomes necessary for persons to focus on how do I survive. Surviving may mean looking at jobs that you may not previously hitherto considered. It may also mean a reduction in the income that you would have earned and the type of benefits you may have earned. So it boils down in the final analysis to a personal decision. Hence the reason why we are providing financial counseling as well as the psychological counseling, because people have to be encouraged to think differently because of the situation that the country, Trinidad and Tobago, and the world has to face. But ideally, and my experience over the years has been one where people adapt. The adaptability of people, I mean to say, it's amazing. Particularly, you find yourself in an environment where you're out of a job, but you may possess a skill that could turn you into a small entrepreneur. And in that context, those persons who are so minded would be channeled in a particular direction, NETCO or the cooperatives division, so that if they have a business idea, and hence the reason why we are collaborating with the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, they have a seed capital program in place, so that if you have an idea, then you can access that grant to begin a small business. Similarly, NETCO will provide similar services.
And if I might add to what the minister is saying, we are operating in a situation where you have unemployed people, and you also have employers who are asking for workers. And there are some employers who have been asking for us to import labor. So the problem is there is a mismatch in terms of the needs and the supply. And I think the Job Expo will assist that. And in relation to what you said as a member of parliament, I know I had one of the MP workers in my constituency who was affected by the firing which took place there for more than 2 years. And he came to me as a constituent and sought help in getting employment in any other way. So people understand when they face challenges in their normal work environment, that there's a wider labor market that they can access. And this Job Expo is just formalizing that in a way to bring both sides into the picture.
And I also wish to add that the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, the construction sector would be stimulated in that regard, perhaps over the short period, so that those persons who would have been functioning in the construction sector, some of them would be able to be absorbed. But you have a situation where people have to focus on the other skills that they may possess. And in that context, that's where the National Training Agency and the National Energy Skills Center comes in terms of certification. A lot of them are highly skilled, but they are not certified. And therefore, we are providing that environment where they can access the training and retraining opportunities that exist.
Something comes to mind in terms of the situation with the steel company. You had a ruling in the industrial court following the company shut down operations and let go some 600 workers. The situation of foreign companies that bring in foreign direct investment in terms of how they operate when there are issues in terms of such as retrenchment and so on. would the government be looking at new legislation to address this, or some way ensuring any contracts signed that workers' rights are protected?
You are absolutely correct. There is need for the amendment of the Retrenchment and Severance Benefit Act and also the Companies Act in terms of providing workers with the required protection, because it's distressing in a situation which occurred recently where 644 workers were sent home without any benefits. Many of them would have given upwards of 20 years service to ArcelorMittal, and they go home with just 1 month's salary. And of course, one ought not to add the payment of vacation leave, because vacation leave is what you earn, and therefore that should not be counted as part of your separation package. It is indeed disheartening, but certainly the intention of the government through the Minister of Labour and Small Enterprise Development is to engage in consultation with the private sector and the labor movement to receive their comments on the amendment of these two pieces of legislation in particular. Following that, once we receive their comments, and they will be given a time frame, 1 month, between 1 month to 6 weeks, to respond and submit their comments. Once we receive those comments, then we will approach the Attorney General to guide us in that regard.
And just to add to that, I think you would recall the Minister of Finance was here 2 weeks ago and mentioned the fact that they would also be looking at amendments to the bankruptcy laws to treat with these issues.
Would the same apply in terms of, there's a committee looking at the issue of contract workers in the public sector? Would there be any need for amendments to any existing laws in terms of protecting those workers?
And there is need for that kind of protection, although there's a cabinet-appointed committee for focusing on the public sector. On the 13th of April, there would be a one-day workshop, a tripartite approach, government, labor, private sector, where we will be considering contract employment, reducing the dependency. So following that workshop, both the employers and labor would have to submit their position on the issue of contract, so that the dialogue that we will be having on the 13th, we hope that positive recommendations flow from that, which would be fed in to the recommendations of the cabinet-appointed committee for the public service. So we'll be dealing with the private and state enterprise sector on the 13th of April under the umbrella of the Ministry of Labour and Small Enterprise Development.
So a question for the sports minister. We saw obviously the victory of the Super Warriors in the World Cup qualifier against St. Vincent. I'm wondering, as the government is now looking at its midterm review of the budget, in terms of support by the state for our national teams and athletes at all levels, would that mid-year review have...
Welcome to this afternoon's Playway Pick 2 and Pick 4 draw, supervised by independent auditors KPMG and presided over by the National Lotteries Control Board. Good luck, everyone.